Hello and welcome to Tanzania Today, a program that aims to project Tanzania's position to the globe economically, socially, politically, diplomatically as well. I am your host, Faitha Ngaga. Today we continue the discussion about the significance of the election process towards national development. Last episode we dived into this topic, but it is a wide topic, so today we continue. We look closely at the significance of the elections towards not only national development but also social stability and social cohesion. Now, before I get to introduce the members of a panel, let me take the honors to introduce for the very first time our very first sponsors of Tanzania Today during the commercial break, NMB Bank. Let's hear a word from our sponsors, and then when we come back, we'll start the discussion about our show.
Nikuulize swali, unajua kuwa unaweza kufanya malipo na matumizi ya pesa zako kila ulipo? Ndiyo, unaweza na NMB mkononi. Kwa kubonyeza tu, unaweza kumaliza kila unachokitaka mkononi mwako. Lipa bili zako au fanya manunuzi mtandaoni kwa kutumia kadi za kidijitali ndani ya NMB mkononi. Tuma pesa hata kwa walio nje au ndani ya nchi kwa urahisi zaidi. Fanikisha mambo yako chap kwa kupata mkopo na mshiko fasta ndani ya NMB mkononi kwa riba nafuu. Maisha yanaenda kasi na NMB tunaenda kasi zaidi kwa usalama, urahisi na haraka zaidi.
NMB Bank, karibu yako.
Welcome back. As I promised, I have groundbreaking members of a panel for this discussion. To my left is retired Ambassador Msuya Mangachi, Dr. Msuya Mangachi, who has extensive knowledge not only in diplomatic issues, but also political issues. Welcome to the show, Ambassador.
Thank you very much.
But also to my right is Isa Omari, who is a political analyst from the University of Dar es Salaam. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Faitha.
So let's break the ice. In your view, Dr. Ambassador, how does political competition during elections contribute to better policies for development?
Thank you very much for that great question. If you follow the election campaigns, they are all talking about development issues. And I would have liked if there was one guideline, say Vision 2050 or Millennium Development Goals, as it were at the international level, and then a national plan for implementation of those goals. And then you have the parties talking about how they are going to implement this grand vision in the future. The incumbent party has an advantage of talking about how they have implemented the vision so far. But the opposition parties have a vintage of criticizing how the programs have been implemented and probably trying to put arguments on how they could implement the programs better. This would have formed a very healthy debate. But the way the campaigns are going on, it looks like we're talking about issues in local places, the needs, priorities which the people have put forward, like in the area of education, health, maybe roads, electricity. Now, the issues are a bit localized, but we wanted to look at the election development nexus on a wider perspective, so that we have a national plan that is moving forward, taking the nation forward towards poverty eradication and development towards maybe improving the economy of the country, to middle-income country, for example, in the future, so that when we hear the debate on how to take the nation forward towards achieving these goals, we have a much richer debate from the campaigners.
Issa, what is your take on political competition during election, and how does it influence the better policies for development?
Well, the underlying logic of having inter-party competition during election has been that to offer voters alternative choices, policy choices. As I said, that oftenly political parties, they do develop election manifestos. And these are actually what we call contracts between political parties and the people, or the electorates. And the electorates often, political parties often promise to electorates various development promises. And so election manifestos often constitute grand ambitions. So one of the challenges has been that the real test lies on whether the political parties will pursue these ambitions consistently once they get elected. So what comes in is that elections often is a means to an end, rather than an end in itself. It means that people are making choices, and these choices they have to translate into substantive development outcomes. And in that way is where now you find the nexus between election and development. Alternatively, if there are no choices, then actually you are talking about choiceless democracy and democracy of tiers. So they have to reflect the interest and the aspirations of the electorate in order to appeal to them so that they can entrust them national leadership and various political positions. And so the idea about elections and democratization has been that election are a goal of democratization, but also a vehicle of democratization. And in this sense, from a substantive perspective, maximalist perspective is that any election, and once those elected to office, it has to translate into substantive development outcomes. Otherwise, then the election might not might not meet the aspirations of the people. And which is why Honorable Ambassador here was talking about we need a richer debate that will also translate not only domestic issues, but also global issues, and how that come together, because domestic politics is not isolated from global dynamics. Actually, these are two, international politics and domestic politics is like a nested game, a two-level game that, of course, you think globally, you act locally. And therefore, you have to align that, the global development aspirations and the national development plans and strategies, as well as policies. So it constitutes policy goals that political parties try to sell to electorates in order to convince the electorates to elect them. So this is how election and inter-party competition, election development, how they are interconnected. And actually they are interconnected. But one of the challenges has been that, not only in Tanzania, but also across many countries, has been that the promises are there. But the concern has been whether these plans will be implemented effectively.
And that would be my second question. We're speaking of manifestos, we're speaking of promises, but how realistic are they, and how much do they align to the development vision? Now, let's jump into that, and then we'll come back to Issa.
Yes, I think the key words here is promises, that the parties are making a lot of promises to the electorate, and without really being accountable or explaining how the promises are actually going to be implemented. So they have to anchor into some kind of data, be it the national budget or the trajectory of development over the next 5 years, the priorities which have been identified, so that they're talking concretely on some issues which already have been researched on and resources have been allocated for implementation. Otherwise, it becomes slogans. You know, everybody would like to develop everything at the same time without coordination, without priorities, then it becomes chaotic. So I think the caution here is to try to link up the promises with some concrete programs which have been identified and prioritized already. If we are building, for example, the standard gauge railway, and you're talking about completing the construction of the parts that have not been completed, but then you have plans for sourcing the funds for completion of this. You are talking something concrete because it is in line with the development priorities of Tanzania, and the funding priorities or the funding measures have been undertaken, and it is possible for people to see that this is a real project that is going to be implemented. But if you're coming with a completely new idea, like I think in the past, one of the parties was promising to build a canal from Dar es Salaam to Dodoma. You know, it looks so abstract because it's not in the plan and it's not realistic. You're just making this kind of utterances to please the electorate, but it's not linked with really the concrete projects which have been identified for implementation in Tanzania. So I emphasize or underline that it is important that the promises that are being made are linked with the concrete programs which are in place and possibilities for resources to implement them in order to have to be realistic about those promises.
How do you assess that?
Yeah, as part of the national political consensus, actually during the political consensus building process when the government was developing the DIRA 2050, the idea was that political parties they agreed that they would use the DIRA 2050 as a blueprint to develop their party manifestos so that they do align with their national development aspirations for the coming years, for the next 25 years. And therefore, they were supposed to do that. But as with any political entity, you have to develop an assessment mechanism and a monitoring to monitor progress on how you deliver on your objectives, particularly policy objectives and the policy goals that we promise to electorate. So it's very important, it's very relevant, a very important essential to have an assessment mechanism and a monitoring mechanism for parties to monitor their progress on what they have promised the electorates. And of course, as I said, that stating the policy is one thing and implementing it another thing. Of course, some will walk talk, others will not, will talk right and walk left. And therefore, voters are watching closely how these parties, they try to do that. And actually, most of them have promised people-centered policies as well as major reforms. And actually, some of the priorities revolve around economic transformation, inclusive growth, good governance, particularly tightening accountability frameworks within government institutions. And also others are promising infrastructural development. I think the policies are almost similar to most of the parties. I don't know, is it because of the DIRA 2050, which is trying to guide the development of the manifestos? But again, it's because of political pragmatism that they are trying to appeal to voters what is of interest to voters. And job creation also has been one of the major promises that have been made the 17 political parties or 18 political parties that are contesting in the 2025 general elections.
When Ambassador was elaborating about this issue, he mentioned about how sometimes the aspect of how these promises are going to be implemented is missing. Now, my question is, do you think the media and other stakeholders have a role to play in order to instigate this how these promises can be fulfilled? The media, the role of the media, what is the role of the media in this issue of the promises and manifestos and how they're going to be implemented?
Well, the media's role is to educate the electorate on the procedures of what needs to be done in order for the election to be transparent and free and fair, for example. A lot of people do not know the concepts, maybe, but also what needs to be done to ensure that this happens. And the role of the institutions that are involved in ensuring the free and fair elections. For example, who knows the role of the INEC, for example? This is the Independence Electoral Commission. You know, what does it do? The role of the PCCB, for example. This is the Anti-Corruption Bureau. To ensure that the elections are not rigged, to ensure that there is no corruption, for example, and so on. The role of the courts to mitigate conflicts in case they arise in the course of the elections and so on. You can see these institutions are there, but people do not know exactly what their roles are. And the media, I think, has a role to play to show how important these institutions are during the elections, for example, and how to handle the matters of conflict in case there is misunderstanding or in the process of the elections and so on. So to me, the issue is education to the electorate, to know, to be aware of how the elections are going to be conducted.
I think the media has a significant democratic role to play in democratization process and in other political processes, like election process. Because one of the role of the media is priming and framing issues. Beyond the civic education role, has been that the media has to make follow-up as part of the democratic role. Because in democratic theory, the media is considered as the fourth pillar of the state, apart from the political executive, legislature, and the judiciary. But also the fourth estate in that regard. And therefore, it is part of the wider civil society, civil society. It is a civil society organization, and therefore it has a significant democratic role to play. And one of that is to follow up on the promises that political parties make and try to scrutinize them publicly in order to try to unpack them, frame them, and prime them, and to see whether they get implemented. Are they feasible? Are they doable? And whether political parties are following through their promises or not, or are they not following their promises?
During the elections, Ambassador, you had something to add?
To also make the point of coverage, that the media is very important in the unbiased coverage of the elections, so that every participating party or citizens feels that they have their issues are well articulated and in a manner which is unbiased. And they shouldn't show that they are in favor of one party than another party. If it is TV time, they should be given access to articulate their policies, maybe in TV or radio or whatever, in an unbiased manner. Yeah.
One of the things that comes up during elections, and even this election, is the issue of peace. Now, what is the link between peaceful elections and social stability, long-term social stability?
Well, I again go to the rules of the elections. You know, if you have created rules and regulations to be followed in an election, and these rules are adhered to, and the procedures are followed, you are creating an atmosphere of peaceful participation in the elections. And when the people perceive that the elections have been done in a manner where everybody had a chance to participate freely, the outcome is like football. If the people perceive that the referee had done his duty of arbitrating the game in a fair way, people do not discuss in the end, they just discuss in the end whether the team was strong or not strong. But presuming the referee gave a penalty in doubtful circumstances, and then the outcome of that match might be a fight between the players and between maybe the spectators, to say that it was not fair, you know, it was not fair the way the game was run. And that's why I insist that if you create a good atmosphere in terms of preparation for the elections, the institutions that are supposed to oversee the elections are in place, the schedule for campaigning is well planned. Each party has an equal opportunity to campaign and convince the people to vote for them and so on. And then the voting was done without corruption and everything. Then the outcome is going to be very peaceful. And this is my take on that
now,
process.
Before you answer this question, let's go for a short commercial break. And when we come back, Issa will be responding to the relationship between peaceful elections and long-term social stability.
Nikuulize swali. Unajua kuwa unaweza kufanya malipo na matumizi ya pesa zako kila ulipo? Ndiyo, unaweza na NMB mkononi. Kwa kubonyeza tu, unaweza kumaliza kila unachokitaka mkononi mwako. Lipa bili zako au fanya manunuzi mtandaoni kwa kutumia kadi za kidijitali ndani ya NMB mkononi. Tuma pesa hata kwa walio nje au ndani ya nchi kwa urahisi zaidi. Fanikisha mambo yako chap kwa kupata mkopo na mshiko fasta ndani ya NMB mkononi kwa riba nafuu. Maisha yanaenda kasi na NMB tunaenda kasi zaidi kwa usalama, urahisi na haraka zaidi.
NMB Bank, karibu yako.
Welcome back. The program is Tanzania Today, and I am your host, Faitha Ngaga. We're continuing the discussion on the relationship between political stability and long-term social stability in the country. Political stability during elections. Issa.
One of the challenges that has been facing post-colonial states, and actually the new democracies or transitional democracies like Tanzania, has been to build political systems that has legitimacy in the eyes of the populace, the majority. And as we all know that without legitimacy, there can be no stability. And without stability, no social and economic progress. And stability is increasingly seen to lie lies in democratic forms of governance. And the ambassador was talking about having, ensuring level playing field among contending political parties, and also trying to promote operational autonomy for election management bodies, so that in the end, this would strengthen public confidence towards these election management bodies and the election institution and the electoral system in general, in order to ensure ultimately that the country has stability. Otherwise, then, contrary to that, then we might creating an environment for what we call electoral violence, which often happens during, and even in post-election violence, because people now are dissatisfied with how the election was managed. And some might, of course, trying to allege that maybe the elections were somehow rigged and so on and so forth. And therefore, it's very important now that political actors and those who are charged with managing and administering elections, that to ensure that the elections has the confidence of contending parties first, but also of the electorates. Otherwise, another thing is that it might also affect even the legitimacy of those who are going to be elected, because now you're talking about one of the fear has been that if then elections are mismanaged, then you're going to have what we call voter apathy, where now people are becoming increasingly, you have the dropping of the public interest in elections, because now they are not, they don't have confidence with the way the elections are managed. And this is how now it comes in the election peace nexus, that elections in liberal peace theories, that democracies are inherently peaceful internally and in their conduct internally in how they manage the political conflicts. And one of the mechanisms of managing political conflicts among political parties, by political conflict I don't mean violence, but the political competition, is through democratic avenues. And the election is one of the mechanisms, and a tool that facilitates, that promotes peace and stability, because now people get the chance to first to assess the policies that political parties are trying to bring up and trying to promote during on their election platforms. But then also, it also tries to highlight how political parties, how electorates now comes to try to see whether this platform and the policies that are promised and their aspirations, their voices are heard by those who are in positions of power. And therefore you give them opportunity to express as part of political expression and exercise their democratic right to participate in elections. And in doing so, we might be now setting or creating conditions for sustainable peace, and eventually we might have peaceful outcomes after election, political outcomes after elections. And therefore that is how this is connected in that way.
So currently the phase is the campaigning phase, and you may see when you look at the people going, you know, the citizens attending the campaigns, they may be many, but sometimes during the voting process, the voters' turnout may not be as expected. What influences voters' turnout in a democratic election?
Well, I think it's as you say, depends on the manifestos, as you say, which create expectations and interest in the people to say, this time the manifesto from Party A or Party B might go to solve our problems if we vote them in power, for example. That one has, to a great extent, I mean, the manifestos must address the real problems of the people in a manner that the people take interest and build these expectations so that they think they can really achieve or solve their problems through ensuring that that party with the best manifesto comes to power, for example. But sometimes I think the indifference comes from people not being aware of the importance of the process of elections. For example, I was having those statistics showing how voters, if you look at the statistics, just give me a second. 1995, for example, the registered voters were 8.9. The voters were 6.8. I think that was quite a high turnout in that. 2000, the registered voters were 10 million and 7.9 voted. In 2005, registered voters were 16 million and 11 million voted. And then 2010, voters were 20 million and 8.6 voted. This was far below 50%. It's like some elections in Europe and America and so on. With all the fanfare, the turnout of those voters is also not very high. So this is a case study which must, must be highlighted to find out what happened in 2010. 2015, the registered voters were 23 million and 15 million voted. Quite a high turnout as well. If you look at that particular year, there was the issue of maybe choosing the candidates for presidency in the ruling party, and one of the main personalities, Lowassa, was not given the opportunity, and he went into opposition, and that created a lot of dynamics, and the competition became the elections became very competitive, but then the voters' turnout was quite high at that time. But again, 2020, registered voters were 29 million, and voters were 15 million. I think one of the factors is the system whereby the change of candidates, like in 2015, late President Magufuli came into power, and there was that kind of competition there in the process of electing the candidate for presidency, and the strong opposition. One of the strong leaders joining the opposition, and thus creating that competition, and hence the interests of the voters was attracted. In 2020, Magufuli was going for a second term, and people were taking things for granted. That, okay, Magufuli was there from President Magufuli was there from 2015 to 2020, and he's going to continue just like that. There was nothing new, and I think it might explain this kind of, there was nothing new to come about. So let us try to make a case study of the changes of presidency. When the changes are happening, that the incumbent is no longer contesting, and there's a new candidate coming in, there seems to be more curiosity, and people come to vote for that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think What affects voter turnout? One is the political confidence, the confidence of the voters on the, particularly with regards to the electoral system and the electoral process in general. The second, we have a strong political opposition, where now voters feel that they have alternative choices in the electoral process. And then also another factor is that there is a conducive environment for organizing and conducting the electoral process. This also influences how the voters go to vote. Of course, the ambassador tried to highlight the change of when there is a succession. During the succession period, you have high voter turnout because now there are uncertainties, political uncertainties. Who is going to come to power? Will this guy come to power? Will not come to power? Because one of the key features of a democratic election is that it creates a certainty on who is going to get elected, even if you have an incumbent in power. And if that you don't have that, then everything is predictable, then that might also affect the way voters are going to come to vote. So what I observe in the 25th general election is that as political parties are deep to their election campaigns, is that you have a one party that is dominating the political and the electoral scene. And then you have other opposition, a struggling opposition. And this, of course, might, in some way affect the way people are going to vote in the elections come October. And so this also might, of course, reflect how now people perceive the opposition, whether do they really constitute an alternative government to the incumbent government, the government in power. And this is how voters try to assess as they try to do a rational, what we call making a rational choice. And we have actually three models of that affects voters' behavior. One is a rational choice model, the second is a sociological model, and the third is partisan model. And so in Tanzania, if you have more than around 36 million registered voters, and out of them you have around 13 to 15 million, around 14 million who are members of the ruling party, then you have majority of voters who are floating voters. These are floating voters, so they just wait to be persuaded in order to whether they are swing voters, or what we call swing votes, in order whether to go to the opposition or to go to the ruling party. And therefore, it's up to political parties now to try to muscle up and trying to revamp their campaigns and to persuade these floating voters so that they support them in their electoral bid for presidential, parliamentary, and council and local council elections. Otherwise, the voters might be disinterested, and the indifference that the ambassador talks about here is what constitutes now what we call voter apathy, which is one of the growing fears in the coming elections. And this is a challenge to both the incumbent party and the political opposition. How would you get voters to vote? So the reason why is very important. Why should I come to vote for you? It's very important. And so they are trying to, as they are deep into their political campaigns, they are trying to mobilize voters for and trying to make promises that will attract voters to vote in the coming October general elections. But so this is how the context within which voter turnout and voter apathy affect the electoral process, and how the electoral process also affect them in different ways, as we have tried to highlight a short while.
As a political analyst, just briefly, how can strong now voters' participation translate into strong development outcomes?
Well, if you have high voter turnout, then it means that both the electoral system, the electoral process, the governing institutions, and the political parties, whether the one that those get elected and those that are not get elected, there's high legitimacy and that people now, there's also high approval, public approval rating of public institutions. And there's also a rising public trust on political institutions, governing institutions. And in this way now, people, it means that they are endorsing the development policy goals that have been promised during the election period. And therefore now people are ready now to commit themselves, because this is a contract. If it's a contract, it's a social contract between political parties and the citizens. And if they have endorsed the contract, it means that the government in power, the government that gets elected, has full support of the public in executing the policies, and that the policies have legitimacy. And this will reduce the tensions and political conflicts at different levels. And therefore, the government will have a swift ride if they execute the plan the way they presented it to the electorates during the election season. And in that way, then people now will be, will try, it will also attract the confidence of the investors, who are both local investors and foreign investors, who believe that if this government has legitimacy, and then because of that, that will also result in political stability. And with stability, as we all know, that political institutions, economic institutions, and even social institutions, they often operate on the basis of confidence, trusts, and legitimacy. And with the legitimacy then comes in different benefits, including investment. So they will have investment, and this will attract more foreign investment and even local investment, because they are trying to support the government that has legitimacy and is a legitimate representative of the people because of the high voter turnout that people have endorsed the process. And also try to bridge the political divisions that resulted as a result of the electoral process. And there now people feel that this government has been elected legitimately and that people have voted for the government. And with high voter turnout, it means that they are also approving the process in general.
Yeah, let's talk about marginalized groups, such as people living with disabilities. How can elections empower marginalized communities?
Yeah, the issue is about inclusivity, right? Marginalized groups is women as well, is youth, and poor people in the rural areas, but also in the towns. Now, here is an opportunity where through the process, the electoral process, they have an opportunity to make their voices heard. They participate in a process where their issues are being discussed, and they have a way to determine who will represent their interests best. And it's done in what is called universal suffrage. In other words, all of them have equal opportunity to vote for the candidate they want, regardless of their situation. And this is an opportunity where the marginalized groups really can make their issues be heard, but also to help them out in terms of opportunity to be elected, for example. The prejudices that exist in the society about women, about disabled people, about youth, and so on. I think mechanisms have been created to have a special representation from these groups, so that when you're talking of parliament, for example, there are special seats for women, there are special seats for youth, there are special seats for people with disabilities, and so on, in order to create a protection for them. But the idea is to emancipate them so that they can equally compete for for these positions. The best example is with the group of women. I think they are allowed only to be represented through the special seats arrangement for one term. But the next term, if they want to come back, it is presumed that they have grown enough confidence to go and campaign on their own and come back. And through that process, quite a number of them have made up to the parliament. And this has increased their representation because they do have these special seats, which are there all the time. But now you are having an additional number of representation from that group, from those who can go and campaign and come back directly to the parliament. So we are looking forward with optimism that a balance will be struck sometime in the future on the representation of the marginalized people.
It's very important now the marginalized group to get represented because now you are also mainstreaming their perspective in development. If you talk about sustainable development, then you're talking about leave no one behind, and you bring everyone on board about inclusivity, social inclusion, and as well as social justice. But again, of course, there is one thing that there has been a reconceptualization that we don't call them person with disability, but to person with different abilities. Because if you are saying that they have disability, then you're actually disempowering them instead of empowering them. Mechanisms have been in place to try to get them into political office, although groups like youth, women, persons with different abilities, they're actually underrepresented in the corridors of power. But they're following, of course, they're in the past, and even after the Beijing Platform for Action, you had the creation of temporary special measure in form of gender quotas in political representation, where now you have that they are represented in, as I said, in ambassador special seats. And this special seat, for instance, for the ruling party, they are divided on different groups. You have the youth, you have the persons with different abilities, you have women, you have those who are workers, you have those who are representing non-government organizations, and so on and so forth. This is part of an attempt to try to make sure that you also bring them into the national legislature and in elected assemblies and elected positions so that you to mainstream their perspective. But one of the challenges has been that the institution of special seats currently is contested because it was supposed to be a temporary special measure, but eventually now you have people are now, most of the women, they don't graduate. Yeah? Most of them, of course, there isn't. It was only this year now. You see that some of the women who once ran through special seats, now they are running through constituent seats. But most of them, they have been into that. Some of them are staying for 10 to 15 years in the same seats, special seats. And this, of course, defeats the initial logic of setting up the temporary special measure, which aims at helping them to empower, politically empowering them so that they graduate and they go to run.
But there be underlying challenges that, specific challenges that maybe women face in the communities, due to the nature of the communities, that's why they find it hard to graduate?
Because we have male-dominated societies, and political parties are to blame. Political parties, they often reluctant and hesitant to field women, particularly in constituent seats, especially fearing that they fear electoral defeat, especially in constituencies where they feel that they might lose to, for instance, to contending parties. And actually, some of them, they tend to feel them in constituency where they feel that it's not their stronghold, just to showcase that they are also supporting women agenda. But I commend the government through the Political Parties Amendment Act, and that now political parties are legally required to first develop gender policy, specific gender, an elaborate gender policy, but also to set gender desks within political parties. And the office of the Registrar of Political Parties is charged with monitoring that political parties abide by the legal requirements in order to, of course, for their registration for the registration to be renewed and revived in time. Otherwise, if they fail to abide by that legal requirement, then these political parties might be deregistered because this is the legal requirement. And this is part of the attempt to try to address the marginalization of these underprivileged groups in political spaces in the country. Again, one of the challenges has been that there are claims of persistent corruption practices and that women cannot fare well in such environment within intra-party politics, which is said also to undermine women candidacy and women political aspirations. And finally, one of the main another challenge has been what we call VAP, violence against women in politics, which is also prevalent, and violence against women in election. And now we have a new phenomenon with this digital revolution, what we call technology-facilitated violence against women, for instance, and other marginalized groups on social media platforms. And therefore, this is all our attempts at trying to undermine the advancement in politics. And what you have is that the more women advance in the corridors of power, the more they are subjected to such kind of violence, like violence against women in politics, because there is a fear. We have a male-dominated society, and therefore now people fear of a change of the status quo. And this, of course, is a challenge that we are still grappling with. And maybe if we have a new constitution in place, then we will try to address this extensively so that in the end we can have a balanced society. And of course, somehow relatively gender parity in politics.
And positions of power. Thank you very much. On that note now, let us hear a word from our sponsors, and when we come back, we continue with the discussion.
Zaidi ya bahari na mipaka, tunagusa mioyo ya wapendwa wetu. Ni rahisi sasa kutuma pesa nje ya nchi kwa kutumia NMB mkononi. Ingia NMB mkononi, chagua tuma pesa, chagua nchi ambayo unatuma pesa.
Na pia tuma pesa kwa gharama nafuu kuanzia shilingi 2,000 tu. Unaweza kutuma pesa kwenda benki au mitandao ya simu kama Safaricom, kwenda Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda na Afrika Kusini.
Kwa uhamisho wa papo kwa papo, gharama nafuu na usalama wa hali ya juu, msaada wako unawafikia familia na marafiki kwa haraka. Hakuna makaratasi, hakuna foleni, ni upendo tu unaotumwa kwa usalama wakati wowote, muda wowote. Kupitia NMB mkononi, unaweza kutuma pesa kwenda Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda na Afrika Kusini. Ni rahisi. Ingia NMB mkononi, chagua tuma pesa, kisha chagua nje ya nchi. Chagua nchi unayotaka kutuma, kama ni Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda au Afrika Kusini. Chagua benki au mtandao wa simu wa mtu mpokeaji, jaza taarifa za mpokeaji, weka kiasi cha pesa unachotaka kutuma kwa kuonyesha viwango vya kubadilisha pesa. Hakikisha taarifa za mpokeaji na kisha tuma pesa. Ndani ya muda mfupi utapokea uthibitisho wa muamala wako. Furahia ada nafuu za uhamishaji na viwango vya kubadilisha fedha vinavyovutia unapotuma pesa kupitia NMB mkononi.
NMB Bank, karibu yako.
Welcome back to Tanzania Today. Now we are nearing the end of our program, and I'm going to ask our guests today to just give a call to the stakeholders in these elections, to the citizens of the country, and to the candidates as well. Let's start with Ambassador Dr. Msuya.
Well, I think my word to the people of Tanzania is that elections are not an isolated case for Tanzania alone. Elections are done in the framework of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for example, of 1948, African Charter for Democracy, Election and Governance, the SADC procedures for elections in the region. And we're doing this to show that we are part of the players in the international community. And as my colleague insisted, we are seeking legitimacy which is very important for example, investors' confidence and the way we are being Tanzania in terms of branding and the name of Tanzania and being accepted in the international community. So we should really make sure that these elections are conducted in a peaceful manner, and the outcomes should be transparent enough to be acknowledged as credible elections like they have been in the past. Thank you.
I want to remind our viewers that elections are not only an expression of national sovereignty, but also popular sovereignty. And they signify that the popular power, the ultimate power of the state rests with the people themselves. And therefore, once they get to election, actually, it's through election that they will promote popular power and popular livelihoods, the development outcomes and the development aspirations that they have. And therefore, they should scrutinize party manifestos rationally so that in the end they make the right decision, a decision that will affect their lives for the next 5 years. And boycotting elections is not a solution for apathy, because ultimately we have a system, or electoral system, that is based on simple majority or winner takes all. And therefore, even if you have the lowest turnout, still the government will get elected. And if that, in that regard, then if they did participate in that, then they will lack the moral authority to question the government. It fails to pursue the policy it promised during elections consistently, and if it fails to follow through its grand political ambitions that they have stated in their election manifesto. And therefore, people should turn out in high numbers to try to elect a government that will deliver on their promises, but also will deliver their aspirations, particularly the youth, who seem to be a silent opposition. Therefore, they have to get to elections so that they channel their discontent in democratic avenues, so that in the end they might have, they might also improve their livelihoods and ensure the stability, continuity, and progress of the nation as a whole.
Thank you very much to the both of you. And on that note, we are ending our show today. Until next time, I was your host, Faida Ngaga. Goodbye.